Welcome, everyone, to Redacted on this Wednesday night. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we try to cover the stories you might not see in the mainstream media. We've got a very busy show for you today. We've got a special guest. Scott Ritter is going to be joining us in just moments. We're going to be looking at the Ukraine war at 6 months as the United States announces a massive new weapons package. And it's really interesting because they announced it literally about 5 minutes ago, the details of it. And we're going to unpack that with Scott because it seems like these are weapons in perpetuity in Ukraine. So we'll unpack that and where the things stand right now in this war.
Plus, we also have another special guest, Bjorn Lundberg, the social scientist who combats the hysteria around climate change. I am especially excited to speak to him today about this trending topic about whether or not climate change is real or not.
Right. So he's got a great book on the climate panic. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at this new student loan forgiveness package also announced just in time for these midterm elections, right? This is a perfect move. So $10,000 in student loan forgiveness from the Biden administration. What is this all about? We're going to unpack the details of all of that.
Plus, do you need to wear a mask? Is the media changing its line on COVID? We're going to talk about that as well.
That's right. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Welcome into Redacted on this Wednesday. Sounds like we had some technical issues there, some audio issues, but that's, live television. That's always what happens.
If you can hear us just fine, maybe a thumbs up would be appreciated. Or if there's any, we always rely on you to let us know if you're hearing us twice or if the audio is too low.
David, Philip, what do we got? Are we good? Okay.
All right.
Hear me now.
We appreciate. Thank you so much.
Your audio cut off for us, so I think we're good. Yep.
All right. Good. Well, yes, we have a very busy show. We're going to bring in Scott Ritter in just a moment to talk about the war in Ukraine at 6 months. But first, I want to tell you all that we do have a daily newsletter. You should all subscribe to it. It's totally free. If you go to redacted.inc, it's the place to go. It's totally free. Again, you can read it over your cup of coffee first thing in the morning, where we cover about 5 or 6 big stories. Just go to redacted.inc right there on your screen. And again, delivered about 6:30 Eastern time is when we try to publish that every day, Monday through Friday.
So I am excited about the conversations happening today. We're going to talk about, obviously, the continued war in Ukraine. We are also going to talk about climate change, something that makes me very itchy. I've been telling my mom and sister about this book and the author that we're going to talk to today, Bjorn Lundberg. And my mom goes, "Does that mean you're going to start buying paper towels again?" And I was like, well...
Don't go crazy.
Let's not get crazy. One step at a time. I might be able to unpeel some of my climate anxiety that I wear like a cloak. So yes, this is very formative for me. Thank you for allowing me to learn along with the rest of you.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk about student loan forgiveness, among other big stories on the show today. But first, it is 6 months, if you can believe it, 6 months to the day that we have the war in Ukraine. And there's a lot to unpack. I want to bring in former UN Weapons Inspector, U.S. Marine Scott Ritter, to provide some excellent analysis on what we've been dealing with. He has been a voice of reason and sort of calm throughout all of this. So, Scott, welcome back to the show, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So there's a couple of big pieces geopolitically that I want to talk about before we talk about some of the military strategy with you on the show tonight. But first, just this afternoon, some breaking news. Boris Johnson, the lame duck prime minister of the UK, showed up to give a speech in Kiev to provide his support once again. Says that all of Britain is united and it's Putin's war. That's why gas prices and everything else are so high in the UK. So first on that piece, I just wanted to get your perspective.
I think it's to bolster morale. Reality is a hard thing. And right now, the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian people are confronted with the harsh reality that they're losing this war. And furthermore, there isn't anything on the horizon that is going to meaningfully alter that outcome. And, I don't think the British believe that Ukraine is suddenly going to win the war, but what they need is the Ukrainians to continue to fight. The longer they can stretch out this conflict on the ground, the better opportunity, or an opportunity might arise that can alter the current algorithm that Russia's running that has them winning no matter what. The goal, I think, right now of the Ukrainians, of the British, the Americans, and others, is to try and create distractions for Russia that will cause Russia to lose sight of its ultimate objective and maybe carry out a diversion of resources that creates a new political reality. Having Boris Johnson arrive, first of all, understand this is no little thing. This is a big deal. So why is Johnson there? If everything was fine, Johnson would not be arriving. Johnson would stay back and would let normal diplomatic, protocol and diplomatic interaction work. But Johnson's arrival means that it is a desperate situation in Ukraine. This is a desperate act by a desperate lame duck prime minister to be seen as propping up a desperate Ukrainian government that is facing desperation on the battlefield.
CNN, well, you wouldn't know that by watching some of the propaganda that you see from CNN. So CNN is there. They're live to this afternoon in Kiev. This is a report. I just want to play this for you, Scott, because there's a number of pieces of propaganda in this CNN report. So it doesn't look pretty desperate when you watch this CNN report. Watch.
People here, we're right in the center of Kiev, the heart, the symbolic heart of the capital. And it's quite extraordinary. The Ukrainian officials have laid out this long line of Russian tanks and armored vehicles and artillery pieces. They said that this war, the Russians expected to have a military parade here when they took over. They said, this is the parade they're getting. If you look behind me here, there's a burnt out tank. It speaks to the intense fighting around the capital months ago. Now, Ukraine pushed back that advance, but still there is intense fighting, a stagnant front line for many weeks now, Max, on the east, the south, and even the northeast of this country. Just this week, a Ukrainian official saying at least 9,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in this conflict. The toll on civilians, on the military, has been very heavy for this war of choice that Russia made. As you said, President Volodymyr Zelensky released a speech a short time ago commemorating this Independence Day and 6 months since the war started.
So we reported just last week that Kiev was sort of beefed up for conflict that never came to the borders of the city, right? And so that's why the media is telling us, look, they're back. They returned to bar life.
They pushed them away.
Right?
They pushed them away.
They succeeded. So if I were a reporter, which I am, but if I were for CNN, I might say, well, can you show me some sort of, paraphernalia of where the battle was instead of this street that just looks like a parade that there has been no conflict in recent times? This is just staged. Even any idiot can see that, right?
Look, this is the war in Ukraine is a huge war. The geographical expanse of Ukraine is massive. It's like fighting a war in England. Going from London across the Channel to Berlin. These are major frontages. And in the early stages of the conflict, there is no doubt that the Russians suffered some casualties, some setbacks. Normally, when you suffer a setback on the battlefield, that means that you abandon some equipment, dead bodies, as you retreat. And the Ukrainians, of course, captured these, and that's what we're seeing. But the Ukrainians right now are trying to project short-term battlefield victories that occurred in February and March and make people believe that a similar thing is taking place today when it's the furthest thing from the truth. the CNN reporter spoke of a stagnant battlefield. There's nothing stagnant about what's happening on the battlefield today. The Russians are in the business of killing Ukrainians. The 9,000 dead figure from Zelensky is a joke. It's not a serious figure. There were documents leaked earlier from the Department of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, dated April 22nd, that speaks of 191,000 casualties, of whom around 80,000 are dead. That's April 22nd. The bloodiest period of time for the Ukrainians has transpired since then. In May, June, July, right now, where the kill ratios are 10, 20, 30 to 1 in favor of Russia.
Wow.
The Ukrainians have suffered horrific losses. And if CNN would go to the front line, they can't. Why? They'll die, because that's what's happening to Ukrainian soldiers right now. They're dying. The Russians are breaking the back of Ukrainian defensive lines. These defensive lines that the Ukrainians had 8 years to prepare, the Russians are rolling them up. And when they finish, they've unlocked the key to the Ukrainian defenses. I think we're going to see the hammer come down, and the Russians start to carry out, what I'll call breakout operations, not your classic deep penetration operations, because, again, the Russians are casualty averse. They have a formula right now that's in play in the East that's working to their unilateral advantage. And I don't think they want to change that formula and create an equal playing space for the Ukrainians. So we'll continue to see a deliberate advance as the Russians control every aspect of the battle. But it's going to be at a quicker pace than what we've seen, because the defenses will no longer be there. The Ukrainians won't be dug in. They'll just be dying in the open.
Yeah, some of the reports I've seen over the past 24 hours have reports of Ukrainian soldiers saying they spend up to 90% of their time hidden in trenches. Russia launching a major offensive towards Kherson. And now this afternoon, the United States, just moments ago before we came on the air and we recorded it and we wanted to play it for you, this is the Pentagon making a new announcement of I love how they say this, $2.9 billion. They won't say $3 billion. They'll say $2.9 billion. And they're happy to say it's the largest package we've ever done individually to Ukraine. I'm going to play this, and I want Scott to make sense of what they're even talking about here. Listen.
In the medium to long term, and they include 6 additional National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, or NASAMS, with additional munitions for those NASAMS, up to 245,000 rounds of 155 millimeter artillery ammunition, which is the ammunition used for the NATO standard artillery systems that have been transferred to Ukraine, up to 65,000 rounds of 120 millimeter mortar ammunition, up to 24 counter-artillery radars. We're also including in this package Puma unmanned aerial systems, or UAS, and support equipment for Scan Eagle UAS systems. We're including Vampire counter-unmanned aerial systems, laser-guided rocket systems, and a substantial funding package for training, maintenance, and sustainment so that Ukraine can keep the equipment they already have in the fight. Deliveries of this USAI package will begin in the next several months and continue over the coming years. While many of these capabilities are not intended to directly contribute to today's fight, they will form the backbone of a robust future Ukrainian force.
Can you? Okay, so that's
quite the goodie bag,
right? But it's not for now. It's like, hey, if you work really hard and you get straight A's, you're going to get all of this stuff over the next few years. So, Scott, we don't need to go through all of the technical specifications, but maybe you can sort of boil it down for us. This is like a care package that's going to last for years in Ukraine.
Well, actually, what I heard is a care package that won't begin to be delivered for many months and won't be completely delivered for years. And so
Right.
It's going to take many years before the Ukrainians get the culminating impact of all of the weapons that were described. What's missing from this, to give you an example, 240,000 155 millimeter rounds. Sounds impressive, but the Russians are firing 60,000 rounds a day. So 6, 12, 18, 24, Marine math, 4 days. I mean, it'll last a little bit longer, but it's not a lot of ammunition when you're talking about the kind of sustained rates of fire that exist on the modern battlefield. And that assumes that all 240,000 rounds make it to the front lines. We know or at least we suspect CBS was going to put out a documentary that talked about this, but they pulled it. But up to 70% of these munitions won't make it to the front lines. They'll be blown up, interdicted, etc. So it's not real numbers that they're putting out here. Even if all 240,000 rounds were delivered today, the reality is, maybe 50,000 would make it to the front lines, and those 50,000 might be expended, might not be expended, but that's 50,000 rounds. The Russians are firing 60,000 per day. Let's say you fire 5,000 rounds a day. That gives you 10 days worth of ammunition. Then you're out. You're out of ammunition. And this is a package that's supposed to run years, and they're going to be out of ammunition in 10 days. And every aspect about this is the same thing. This is a political action. This is not designed to change the outcome on the battlefield. And I can guarantee you the American generals in the know recognize that the war will be over before the bulk of this material ever is in a position to be sent to Ukraine, let alone received and used by Ukraine. Ukraine won't see the vast majority of this equipment. They won't get to use the vast majority of this equipment. And anything that gets delivered will either be destroyed or captured by the Russians. So thank you. I mean, I'm sure the Russians right now are writing thank you notes to Joe Biden and the Pentagon for providing them with billions of dollars of high-tech American equipment that they can use to train on or equip militia forces, or maybe equip anti-American forces overseas, give them American weapons to fight the American troops or American proxies. Whatever it is, this is not going to change the outcome on the battlefield. This is literally a waste of taxpayer money. The American people should be outraged about what's happening.
Well, but if we were swallowing the media narrative, it is that Ukraine is succeeding, right? And now Washington is sort of giving Ukraine the blessing to go after recapturing Crimea. And so we're not supposed to think that. We're supposed to think casualties are low, success is high, we got to keep going. And also they will take Crimea back. And none of that seems to be true.
Yeah, that Crimea piece, I want to really focus on that here, which is that Zelensky says we are going to take Crimea back. He said this over the past 24 hours by any means necessary. Any means necessary. To Natalie's point, this is like a blessing, a weapons blessing, that go ahead. Because he says by any means necessary. Well, it's what means did they have left, if not then for the international NATO community, which is going to be providing this assistance to help them make this happen. Well, the people
of Crimea voted in 2014 to join Russia. That was their will as well as Russia's will, right? And so they're saying they want to take it back. Although the history is also, it's a storied history, of course, and there is divisive loyalty in the people who live there. But to think that Ukraine is not only going to recapture the Donbass and then keep going and take back more than what they started from is really science fiction.
Yeah, Scott, what's your thought on this?
My wife gave me the green light to climb Mount Everest. She's not going to provide the $60,000. She knows that my knees are bad, that my back's bad, that I don't do well at altitude, but she gave me permission to climb Mount Everest. I'm going to climb Mount Everest with as much certainty as Ukraine's going to retake Crimea, meaning it will never happen. The international community, primarily in the West, has long said that they do not recognize Russia's acquisition of Crimea, nor will they recognize Russia's acquisition of the Donbass or Russia's acquisition of what will be called Novaya Russia, the ethnic Russian majority portions of Ukraine that Russia has indicated are going to belong to Russia once this fight's over. But the reality is Russia's going to own Crimea, own the Donbass, own Novaya Russia, and there's nothing anybody can do to change that. Zelensky lives in a fantasy world. He's speaking political talk, but hot air does not beat cold steel. I'll make the following wager against anybody, that Zelensky will be removed from office long before any Ukrainian troops ever set foot in Crimea or Donbass or anything. Ukraine is losing this war. What Zelensky's talking about is total victory on the side of Ukraine. Total victory. That means that Ukraine has somehow flipped the narrative, flipped the script, and they found a way to defeat Russia strategically, tactically, operationally. It just isn't in the cards. It isn't going to happen.
Without the manpower or the firepower. They just don't have it. right? No matter what the West can sort of wave around saying we're sending it, they just don't have it.
Well, I think we need to understand not only does Ukraine no longer have it, the West doesn't have it to give. I mean, what the United States is providing here, again, I'm not going to parse it out. It's nothing. The Russians would call it mielich, change. It's literally nothing. You need tanks. You need the artillery pieces. You need the HIMARS systems. You need aircraft. And then you need the manpower to use this, trained manpower. Ukraine doesn't have this. And so, again, hot air is fine. Anybody can talk big, make PowerPoint slides, et cetera, but turning theory into reality requires men, blood, steel. And the Ukrainians simply don't have it. You know who does have it? Russia. Russia's been planning for this war. And this is something a lot of people need to think about. When this war started, this special military operation, many Western analysts were saying that Russia was going for the quick kill. Quick kill. And when it didn't happen, the Russians were flustered, didn't know what to do. Oh my gosh, we didn't do the quick kill. Now we're going to slogging match. We're exhausted, et cetera. None of that's true. Russia's using 60,000 rounds of ammunition a day. That means that Russia, at some point in time, many years back, had to start allocating the resources to procure this ammunition and set it aside to make sure that there was sufficient resources to carry out this action. Russia's not stalled. Russia's not halted. Logistically, Russia's running on all cylinders, which means this war was planned years ago to be waged exactly the way it's being waged right now. Let that sink in. Russia's doing exactly what it always planned on doing. It's the Ukrainians that are losing, not the Russians.
You know, one of the things we try to do on this channel is cut through the propaganda. And literally this morning, I was listening to, and it was also published in the Financial Times. The Financial Times podcast specifically had on their Ukraine reporter, their foreign reporter, to specifically, and one of the things he specifically said was, the evidence of those tanks that are on display in downtown Kiev right now, where they're having this parade, is evidence that Russia, it was poorly planned on Russia's part. They were caught flat-footed, and their leadership didn't know what they were doing. Those were the words that came out of the Financial Times' mouth.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Financial Times guy actually put on a uniform and go out and fight. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Anybody who's been involved in large-scale combat knows that both sides suffer casualties. It's not a consequence-free action on anybody's part. Ukraine had the largest army in Europe, the second largest army after Turkey, highly trained, well-equipped, trained to NATO standards, well-led. And the notion that 260,000 active duty forces backed up by another 400, 500,000 reservists trained weren't going to inflict losses on the Russians is just, it's absurd. Of course Russia suffered losses. Of course Russia suffered casualties. Of course Russian units were forced to abandon equipment in the field. And of course Ukraine managed to get control over some of this equipment. And that's what you're seeing right now. But that's not a sign of victory. That's a sign of just normal combat. Victory is determined not on what happened in the past, but what's happening right now. I dare these reporters to go to the front line. They won't, because they'll die. That's what's happening to Ukrainian soldiers right now. They're dying in massive numbers. Every time they try to accumulate enough armor to go forward and launch a counterattack, the Russians identify it, locate it, and destroy it. It's happening on a daily basis. The Ukrainians cannot launch counteroffensive because they don't have the resources to do it. Russia is dominating this battlefield on every aspect. So, it's one thing to sit there in Kiev and live your fantasy life. It's another thing to go forward and see what reality is. But you know what, Mr. Financial Times reporter, stay in Kiev and wait. Pretty soon reality is going to come to you.
Well said. I'd be remiss, Scott, if we didn't. I want to get you out of here on this question, former weapons inspector. And one of the things that you've been focusing on is what's been happening at the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhya. And we now have evidence been turned over by the Russians to inspectors that there was shelling from the Ukrainian side. You've called what Ukraine has been doing against the nuclear power plant evidence of war crimes, and you've also talked about the American involvement in the attack on the nuclear power plant as it relates to the HIMARS system. So Can you give us an update on what's going on at the nuclear power plant and where you see things now?
Well, I mean, right now it appears that the Ukrainians are in in what I call the diplomatic endgame, and they're not going to win it. But they tried to create a crisis by shelling the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant. They were supported in this by the United States, both diplomatically and politically. Witness Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, raising the issue of the so-called the nuclear shield that Russia was, using the power plant to hide behind with forces. He raised that on August 1st. August 5th, Ukraine begins the attacks, and the United States supports Ukraine's assertion that it's Russia shelling its own forces. Absurd. Even Zelensky couldn't sustain that lie. He finally had to admit that it was Ukraine attacking. But the Ukrainians' point is they had to attack because Russia was putting military forces in the plant. The United States backed this up, and no intelligence has been provided. I mean, remember during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we said Russia had missiles in Cuba. Russia said we didn't. We provided photographs that prove they did. KAL 007, we said the Russians shot it down. The Russians said, no, we didn't shoot it down. We brought the audio tape in, proved that they did. Now Blinken saying Russia's putting heavy weapons in the nuclear power plant. Russia says, no, we're not. Where's the photograph, Blinken? It doesn't exist. It's pure propaganda. The idea is to create a political crisis of such magnitude that the international community comes together and insists on deploying an international peacekeeping force in Zaporizhzhya that would require Russia to give up the nuclear power plant, basically to allow the international community to accomplish that which the Ukrainian military can't do. But the Ukrainians have lost this. The inspectors now are on the ground. They're gaining access to the data that proves that Ukraine attacked. They'll also gain information about just the safety of the plant and the kind of operations that are taking place under what supervision. They're going to find out that the plant is competently managed, that the Russians are doing a very good job from an oversight perspective. As long as the Ukrainians don't shell the plant should function in total conformity with international safety standards and in conformity with whatever the safeguards agreements are in terms of protecting a nuclear material that's associated with the plant. Russia's doing everything right. It's Ukraine, again, that is not only being aggressive, but in a manner which violates international peace and security. If there was a Chernobyl-like event at Zaporizhzhya, it would impact all of Ukraine, Russia, Europe. It would be a global disaster. So anybody who is launching artillery strikes against Zaporizhzhya is committing a war crime of the most horrific nature, a crime against humanity. And any nation that greenlights this is likewise complicit in that crime. That's the United States of America. And then anybody who's involved in facilitating the targeting of American-provided weapons so that they can impact the nuclear power plant is likewise complicit in a war crime. And that goes for every one of you American soldiers that are involved in the targeting process. You may think you're just doing your job. Wake up, guys, pals. You just committed a war crime. And if there was any other government in the world besides the United States in a position to hold you accountable, you would be prosecuted as a war criminal. The fact that you're not going to be prosecuted doesn't mean that you haven't conducted something that's heinous in the eyes of the world. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Well, we want to thank you for that analysis. I had one sort of relevant thought. Do you know anything about those exoskeleton soldier suits that are like Iron Man? Because that was my idea for how you could actually climb Everest if you wanted to. Are those things real?
They are real. They are very real. And I don't know how they function at altitude and low temperatures. But hey, if that's what it takes to get me on top. You can look into it.
Yeah.
Look into that.
Me
That's
too.
your homework. Okay.
Me too. I need it.
My climbing partner.
That's right. Scott Ritter has been our guest. Scott, where can people find you? I know you do amazing work on Telegram and your writing as well. Is that the best place to find you? Can you give
the
that?
The best place is the Telegram channel, and I link everything I do to that channel. So it's a one-stop shop for anything related to me. I'm sure people are starting to overdose. I'm overdosing, but I will continue to do this as long as the situation finds my analysis to be valuable.
Well, our audience finds your analysis to be valuable, and we really appreciate it, making sense of everything that's going on right now in this craziness. So, Scott, thanks for joining us. Our guest, Scott Ritter, thanks once again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to all of you for subscribing. Again, we are closing in on 1 million subscribers here on the channel. So thanks to all of your support and being a great part of our community here. You know, we know that you have the chance to go and watch CNN or flip on Fox or flip on any other station, and you choose to be here with us, and we really appreciate it. So that drives us every day to try to do the best show that we can. Someone tweeted earlier to say that this is their nightly viewing now. So thank you. Was it Rick? I think was his name.
It was,
Rick.
and his wife. Yeah.
Rick and his wife. He didn't give his wife's name.
No.
But we said, tell your wife thank you as well. So thank you so much for that. Please smash that like button as well. It really helps to drive it further out into the algorithm. We've got a lot more news to get to here on the show. We're going to be sitting down with another special guest to talk about the climate false alarm. Bjorn Lundberg. He's got a new book. What is the name of his new book?
It's actually not a new book, but there is an epilogue that he has written since the pandemic. It's called False Alarm, and how climate change, I'll give you False Alarm, how climate change panic costs us trillions, hurts the poor, and fails to fix the planet. This is something that's very personal to me, because I have been one of those people who really felt like climate change deniers were just demon spawn, and I learned so much from his research and how we can actually make real changes that doesn't harm poor people, and then feel a little better about ourselves if we are not constantly using something single use. So maybe sometimes using things that are single use, tapping my toe in there.
We'll see. We're also going to talk about the student loan forgiveness program in the United States. That was announced this afternoon. We'll give you the details of that, what it will mean. We're also going to look at more COVID lies exposed by the mainstream media on masking and mandates. You're not going to want to miss this story. It's really, really crazy to see sort of an about face from some popular television stars on COVID. All of that and more. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Nugenix, because, you know, look, as you're getting older, we just heard Scott talking about, you know, not being able to summit Everest. I'm the same way. As you get older, you know, maybe you get a little bit of that dad bod, feeling a little less like your old self. You don't have time to work out, but you want the energy in the body that you once have. Well, you've got to try Nugenix. After you try it, you will feel revived and working out just like you used to, maybe when you were back in college. That's how you'll feel. You're feeling like you just can't get in shape. It's not your fault. You got to give this a try, because as men age, our bodies naturally lose free testosterone. So here's the thing. I want you to say, you got to try this, because if you want more energy to counter the negative effects of physical effects of aging, Nugenix Total T Testosterone Booster with Testofen will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, and help you look and feel like the man you really want to be. Because Nugenix Total T boosts free testosterone that the aging process robs, you're going to feel stronger, leaner, with more energy and more drive, more passion too. Your partner will notice the difference as well. Every product professes quality. Many other products use generic ingredients. You're not going to get that with Nugenix Total T. They are also the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC. So guess what? You're going to get a free bottle of their Nugenix Thermo, which is their most powerful fat incinerator ever. They've got key ingredients to help you get back in shape fast, absolutely free. You're going to get this free bottle if you just text the word redacted. Text the word redacted to 231-231. So text the word redacted to 231-231. You're now going to get a complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T when you text redacted to 231-231. Message and data rates may apply. Terms apply. Available at nugenix.com/terms. Well, over the past 24 hours, the term no climate emergency has been trending all over Twitter. Why, may you ask? Well, 1,100 scientists have added their name to a climate declaration, basically saying, let's stop the madness. There is no climate emergency.
Well, our next guest is Bjorn Lundberg, author of the book False Alarm, How Climate Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. And he is exactly the person that I want to ask about this, because this book really changed my worldview. I will admit, sort of a climate snob, and I felt comfortable telling people to change their lives and their habits until this book. And so I want to ask, I'm so glad to talk to you. I'm thrilled to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Can you first sort of respond to this message and how it's really riling people up emotionally?
So, look, and thanks a lot for being on the show. So my sense on this is really, yes, there is no climate emergency. There's a real problem with climate, but the way that we're being told this is the end of the world, and look, we do that with a lot of things. News has a tendency to just focus on bad stories, but there's also a preponderance of focus on things that could potentially be really scary, and then later on, oh, we found out it wasn't. And it often neglects that we are very, very good at adapting and very good at dealing with problems. And so we're being scared witless for very little reason. Let me just give you one, I think, kind of scary statistic. So the OECD did a new survey of all the OECD and also some non-OECD countries. So basically the rich world. And what they found was, on average, in the rich world, 60% of all people believe that global warming will likely lead to the end of mankind. That's just astounding. And remember, if you actually read the UN climate panel reports, which I don't recommend, they're very long and somewhat boring. But if you read them, there is no mention of this. There is no indication that this is the case. Now, global warming is a problem, yes, but it's by no means challenging the end of the world. And this, of course, both leads to scaring our kids witless. That's why we have people like Greta Thunberg. If I was a teenager and watched the news night after night telling us this terrible thing happened, and it's all because of global warming, I understand why you'd get really scared. Yes. That's both wrong, and it also leads to bad decisions because we're scared witless, we make bad and panicky decisions, and of course, it means that our kids, say, why should I bother going to school? Right. I understand that, but it's terrible because it's wrong. So yes, absolutely, there's no climate emergency. There's a problem, and we're not fixing it well because we're scared and we do bad policy.
And you have a new piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning. If people are dialing into the Wall Street Journal, an opinion piece, and you write the Inflation Reduction Act does little to reduce climate change. Of course, this has been much discussed over the past week. President Biden signing the Inflation Reduction Act into law. And Democrats are saying this is the biggest move to reduce our climate emergency ever in the history of the world. You say it does nothing, almost little, to reduce climate change. Why? I guess this is where it all comes from, right? It's the politicians pushing this narrative. If the UN climate panel saying there is no emergency, then it's all fabricated.
Well, I think it's slightly different than that. So fundamentally, there is a problem. Politicians are saying we want to do something to deal with it. So they're throwing lots of money. So the Inflation Reduction Act just on climate is proposing to spend $369 billion. Now, this will actually reduce carbon emissions from the US. The point that I made was, well, why are they only talking about emissions? I'm not affected by emissions. I'm affected by temperature and sea level rise. And so if you actually go and look at how much will this affect temperature, well, plug it into the UN climate model. It's readily available. I did that. If you plug in what we expect will be reduced from the US emissions over the next decade and possibly even over the next 80 years, how much will that actually change temperature? And the answer is very, very little, depending on whether you're in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So I'm just going to give you both. In Celsius, it's a half a 1,000th of 1 degree temperature reduction by the end of the century. In Fahrenheit, it's almost a 1,000th of a degree Fahrenheit. That's just nothing. And even if you sort of very generously assume that after all the money is run out with the Inflation Reduction Act, we will still be cutting enormous amounts of CO2. It will reduce temperatures by less than 1.5/100th of a degree in Celsius and about 3/100ths in Fahrenheit. This is simply because we talk about stuff that sounds impressive rather than talk about what will actually happen. And the reason why so little will happen is because cutting about 8% is what they're talking about, 8 percentage points from the US, is just not what's going to change the world. First of all, the US is much, much larger than the 8%. The US is only one part of the rich world, and even the rich world is only a small part of most of the emissions that are going to come from China, India, the rest of Asia, and Africa. We have no sense of how rich, well-meaning people will cut carbon emissions and do a little good, but that most of this is about getting India, China, and Africa to cut. And we're not there when we're telling, look, all it takes is spend $369 billion and you'll cut it a little bit. They're not going to say, ooh, that sounds great. I want to do that too.
Right.
Look, they have other and more important priorities like getting their populations out of poverty and get them food and get them education. So not surprisingly, we're only going to fix climate when we make green energy so cheap everyone will want it. Remember what the US did. So the US basically took fracking from something that was an idea in one guy's mind in the early 2000s. 10 years later, for about $10 billion in subsidies, they produced a technology that basically enabled lots more gas to be mined. That meant that gas became cheaper than coal. That meant that the US reduced its carbon emissions more than any other nation in the world over the last 15 years. And crucially, it makes the US about $150 billion in more GDP every year. That's a huge win. You have cheaper energy, you have less pollution from climate change, and you get richer. How is that not a win? That is what we should try to get everyone else to do. So Europe, obviously, with the war in Ukraine, but also China and India. If we could get them fracking over the next 10, 20 years, we could cut carbon emissions much more, and it would be cheaper for them, and it would be better. So this is a technology issue much more than it is a moral issue. And we would be much smarter about it if we stopped being so scared.
But fracking has such a bad reputation. We have celebrities such as the Incredible Hulk. He's very anti-fracking.
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo, right? Talking about how it harms people. And so people who are well-intentioned, who don't understand the technology, then think, well, no, this is actually harming people. And so what we need to do is take away the cheapest energy, which you point out harms poor people first, right?
Yes. So there's two things to this. Look, any energy technology has downsides. So remember, coal pollutes a lot. It probably kills more than 500,000 people every year. It's not like our existing energy technologies are great. Solar panels have people falling down when you install them on your roof. Nothing is safe in that way. And yes, fracking has problems, much, much less than what was highlighted when people first were talking about it. And we have good regulation for most of this. So if you look at the total cost and benefits, so the biggest study done in the US, I think it's a couple of years old now, showed that the net benefit, as I talked about, was about $150 billion because you just get much richer. But there is a cost to fracking, mostly in increased air pollution. It's not really the drinking water, but there's more air pollution in local areas, which is probably costing about $25 billion. So there are costs, and the people who get those costs should be in some way reimbursed. Now, they are in the US because you own the land where you frack. And that's why most people are actually willing to say, all right, it's going to be a little more air pollution here in my neighborhood, but I'm also going to get fabulously rich. Okay.
Right.
So you make that decision, but we haven't in Europe because you don't own the underground. So what you basically have is a situation where someone will come in and frack, they'll make a lot of money, but you'll just be left with the air pollution. I get why most people don't want that. And so we have a systemic problem, which you could rectify through legislation. This is not a wicked problem. We have $150 billion in benefits, $25 billion in disbenefits. We should be able to figure that out. But we're not. And yes, Mark Ruffalo is not helping when he's just showing us samples of bad water and that kind of stuff. That's just silly.
But we're told that climate change disproportionately hurts the poor. So we must take away resources from the poor, right, in order to help them. When your point is that our solutions hurt the poor.
Yeah, they get screwed over and over again.
And it's true that climate change will hurt the world's poor the most because they typically live where it's already pretty damn hot, and they will be harmed more with climate. that's often, as you say, used as an argument to say, so we should help them by cutting carbon emissions. But remember, poor people everywhere are hurt worst by pretty much everything.
Yes.
It's not like poor people are well off in all kinds of other ways. That's why they're poor. So they're hit worse with bad education, with health, with nutrition, with any other issue. And so in reality, there is something almost pathological in the way that we seem to say, look, the world's poor, whose kids are dying from easily curable infectious diseases and not enough food and bad education, all kinds of other things. I think it's really sad for them. So you know what? I'm going to help them by not driving my car tomorrow. What? Right. At very best, it'll make them slightly less worse off in 100 years instead of actually helping them right now. There are so many things we could do to help them right now. And of course, crucially, if you want to help poor people getting better able to tackle global warming, you should think about adaptation. Remember, a hurricane that hits Florida, yeah, it makes a lot of destruction, but and typically kill a few people, and that's it. But the same hurricane hitting, for instance, Guatemala, will be wiping out their economy and killing tens of thousands of people. So the point here is, if you're poor, you're really badly hurt. Should we help them by making future hurricanes slightly less stronger? Or should we help them by getting rich so they are not living in corrugated roof and don't know how to deal with these issues, but are well-worn and live in mason houses and better infrastructure and are much more resilient? Of course, it's the latter. It's both better for climate, but it's also better for all kinds of other things.
Do you see a movement happening here? I mean, again, we talked about off the top here, these 1,100 scientists, and not just, we have Nobel Prize winning scientists who are on this list who are saying enough is enough. This outrage and the political response to this problem is out of alignment with the actual problem. And I was surprised you sort of set out in the beginning of the book to talk about global warming is real. But the way that the politicians, of course, are framing it is not, and it's unreasonable to think that the world is going to end in. So we only have I guess according to them, we only have like 12 years left, and then we're done. We're totally done, right? We have to hit these climate targets. We've heard John Kerry talk about this as he flies around in his jet, that we only have 12 years left. So I was surprised by that you talk about global warming is real. I didn't think that you would go there. So talk about that aspect of it. How is global warming real? What should we be concerned about? And maybe what are some of the policies we could put in place to actually fix that problem?
Yes. So I'm a social scientist, so I'm mostly focused on the cost and benefits of our different solutions. So I simply take what a lot and literally thousands of climate scientists and other scientists are telling us. Yes, global warming is real. Fundamentally, if you put more CO2 into the atmosphere, which typically comes from burning fossil fuels, you will create an extra slight blanket around the world that will simply insulate us a little more. Now, this has been incredibly good. If we didn't have this, the world would be freezing cold. So we should be happy about this, but we're adding a little more, and that will be a problem. For this very, very simple reason, that all of our societies are built to what our historical temperature was, or historical situations from all kinds of weather. So, imagine Miami and imagine Boston. Miami, semi-tropical weather, Boston freezing cold in the winter, yes. Right? Or, here in Europe, Correct. It would be sort of Athens and Helsinki. Both cities are pretty well adjusted to their current conditions. If you made those conditions different, either if it became warmer or if it became colder, both would have to spend money on adapting. That's really the basic point. If you change the world's climate, it's not like there's an optimal climate out there and we're somehow magically there 100 years ago and now we're screwing it up. It's more that we have adapted our world to what it used to be. If that temperature and other things change, that will be costly no matter what we do. It's not going to be phenomenally costly, but it will be costly. So remember, for instance, as temperatures rise, you're going to see more heat waves, and you're also going to see fewer cold waves. This matters because many, many more people die from cold than from heat. So actually, over the last 20 years, we've seen fewer people die in total, contrary to what you hear in the news. But it's still a problem that more people will die from heat. But there's a very simple solution. That was what you asked me. What are the solution? Air conditioning. It's not rocket science.
Our guest has been Bjorn Lundberg. He's the author of the book False Alarm: How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. Excellent book. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's changed lives. Hopefully it'll change a lot more lives.
It's made me
as well.
like 5,000% less obnoxious. So that is helpful.
That's a win. That is an absolute
That's a
win.
weird statistic, actually. But, yeah,
That should be on the book jacket.
99.9%.
It's made my wife 5,000% less. Yeah, that's what we're going to put on
I
that.
still have a long way to go. I can be pretty obnoxious.
Bjorn, thank you so much for joining us here on Redacted. Keep up the great work. You know, someone in the chat was just saying, I think Natalie was a Karen in a former life.
Yes. Yeah.
I think so. Perhaps.
Sometimes I have to
She's a recovering Karen.
refrain from being
Well,
too Karen-like.
yeah, I don't know.
I try, you guys. And I will say that doing research for this show has helped me a lot to realize that I don't know everything. I don't understand everyone's plight in the world, and I should not be telling people how to act or how to behave. And neither should sort of other people who are privileged.
No, I think all of us, you know, that you watch this show because we're learning together, we're seeking the truth. That's the purpose of this show, is to question everything, to seek the truth together, right? To have on intelligent people, to not swallow what the mainstream media tells us, right? I saw someone in the chat during this interview now just saying, hey, but the mainstream media tells us that fracking is terribly scary, right? It's awful. Okay, that's what the mainstream media is telling you. I have independently interviewed individuals who have had, you know, groundwater and drinking water contaminated in Pennsylvania from fracking, and families that have been ruined as a result of it. Absolutely the case, where they've then had these companies come out and pay them off, right? But is that the whole story, right? We should be asking larger questions.
And what are the opportunity costs of this, right, happening? And so, yes, this is what the mainstream media tells us, and I feel very uncomfortable saying that. I'm like, oh, we're for fracking? I thought we weren't.
But we should also be questioning when the Biden administration tells us that the best way out of poverty is for you to winterize your home with solar panels. Like, okay, so you're going to spend $17,000 that you don't have to put solar panels on your house. So you see, we want to be questioning all of these things, right? And that's part of our show. And none of us are perfect. And we all have a lifetime
like
to
you
learn,
don't-
right? Go ahead, David.
You don't have any money, and it's like, hey, you can get this loan. I know you don't have any money. You need this loan. If you give us $10,000 down, we'll give you the $20,000 loan.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and so should be questioning all of these narratives that we hear in the mainstream media. There's no one perfect answer to anything. So really fascinating. We're going to have a deeper discussion with Bjorn. We're going to do a separate interview with him, which we will release as a redacted conversation. We're going to do a deeper dive with him. We'll release that a little bit later this week. So be sure to check that out as well. But we've got other news we're going to get to here on the show. We are going to talk about the student loan debt forgiveness, which President Biden, Team Biden, just rolled out, and we're going to give you the details of it. It's kind of a little tricky. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at the COVID lies exposed. Some members of the mainstream media and doctors doing an about face on COVID narrative. We'll talk about that. But first, I want to tell you how you can get 13 free stocks valued up to $32,000 right now just for opening a free account with our favorite trading platform. Those are our friends over at Moomoo. Now, I'm going to give you the link right here on the screen where you can go and sign up. Many of you already have, but if you don't have it, you should go and try it. Again, it's free, and then you'll get these stocks once you make your initial deposit, but think of it like a bank account. You never have to spend that money. You just open the account, and then you get your free stocks, and you can, watch those stocks increase in value. And while you're watching those stocks increase in value, you can also be learning, because they've got a great learning platform. So you can go through and take some of their courses that they have for free inside of the app. You can understand how stocks work, buying and ETFs or holding long-term portfolio of assets that will grow with you and your family. Maybe you want to, buy different, different ETFs, different stocks. You want to buy different crypto, anything like that you can do inside of Moomoo. So I encourage you to go down, and plus you get the free stocks. And then even if you never do anything with the account at all, you could just sell the stocks, and then you've got the that money and then transfer it back to your bank account. Again, totally up to you, but check them out. That's my favorite trading platform. They are massive. They've got 24/7 financial news. They have free level 2 trading data. If you want to do day trading, you can use that as well. And for those that don't feel comfortable trading with real money, like if you're just getting started, you can do what's called paper trading. So you can actually just trade using like fake money, and you can see how well you're doing and kind of monitor certain. Maybe you could follow Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, because his stock picks have been fantastic.
Yeah.
So, hey, there's actual whole blogs devoted to Paul Pelosi's stock picks because they know what Nancy's going to be talking about. So hey, there's an opportunity. Follow what he does. Maybe invest a little bit here and there in the same semiconductors that Nancy Pelosi is going to fly into Taiwan and promote. So the best part, if you're looking for a professional trading platform to research trading, Moomoo could be one of your best choices. Go there right now to get 13 free stocks. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo today to get 13 free stocks valued up to $32,000. Again, that's redacted.inc/Moomoo. You have to use that link to get those free stocks.
All right, let's talk about student loan forgiveness. The Biden administration, you may recall, has been promising that it will do some kind of student loan forgiveness. In fact, this was a promise on the campaign trail.
Right, $10,000 was his promise.
Yes, and $10,000 is exactly what he delivered on today. Now, is this good timing because the economy is hard, or is this opportunistic timing because November elections loom? Well, you can be the judge of that. But we're going to give you the details, and we're going to break down the math. We're going to tell you who this helps and who this harms. And I'm going to this is a spoiler alert, it's inconsistent. Right? Doesn't help everybody. It helps some people. So buckle up first. Let's do some maths, as they say in the UK. So the program will forgive $10,000 in student loans for people who make less than $125,000 per year, and $20,000 for those who used Pell Grants, which confused me a little because Pell Grants typically do not have to be paid back. But I guess this means for some people who then have been on the hook to pay them back because their circumstances change, then they're going to get $20,000 in loan forgiveness. That means poof, it disappears from the liabilities on your balance sheet. You no longer owe it, right? Now, usually loan forgiveness is taxed as income, but the administration will allow this loan forgiveness to go untaxed. So that is also a bit of an extra gift, right? $10,000 of tax-free wealth increase, right? The White House says this means about 15 million people who have a balance of $10,000 or more will see that wiped away. But about 40 million Americans have student loan debt, so this is less than 40%, but okay. It will help some people. Let's put up this graphic that the president tweeted today when this was announced. These are all the details, right? $10,000 without a Pell Grant, $20,000 with forgiveness for this income level. And also, it will freeze student loan payments. You recall student loan payments were frozen during the pandemic, and then this freeze continued to be extended. So they are extending it now. It's not pandemic related, but I guess it's related to the economic crisis, right?
It's election related.
He did say this is the last time they're going to do this. So loans you should expect to start back up in January. Now, of course, this announcement has been delayed several times. So if we're saying, well, he just was waiting until the economy was shit, I guess, right? Or election related.
Well,
yes.
I guess you don't play this trump card, right? So you're holding it. And everyone was, Elizabeth Warren was pushing for $50,000 in student loan forgiveness, right? Senator Warren and Chuck Schumer came together and gave a speech where they were like, we're going to go 50,000. We want the president to go to $50,000 in student loan forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
So then they held off on it. They held off on it. And now, as we're entering the doldrums at the end of the summer, going into the midterm elections, and we're going back to college, right? We're going back to school.
Yeah.
Here we go. President Biden comes in on a horse. By the way, if you can believe it, his approval ratings have been going up. Do you know why? Because he hasn't given any speeches.
Okay.
He's not going near any podium, any television camera for an interview. So this is the strategy. Keep him away from cameras and then give people free money?
Well, let's look at who is actually benefiting from this and ask ourselves whether or not these people will continue to remember this in a few months when it's time for election. So we're going to use the Penn-Wharton model, which is a nonpartisan group of economists and data scientists, because in advance of this announcement, they had been running analysis models on what they thought were the hypotheticals, because they did run models on $10,000 forgiveness. They ran models on $50,000 with and without the income requirement. So if you look at this chart and you see the different hypotheticals, right? The first one is whether or not they'd forgive $10,000 without an income gap or forgive $50,000 with an income cap. So what they actually ended up announcing, I circled here in red, or I boxed in red. So which income group will be most benefited by this? Well, it's mostly second quintile, middle quintile, and fourth quintile. So it is this sort of middle class, right, group of income that will be helped by this in the most proportion, which is okay, right? But what will it do to the rest of us who do not have this debt or do not qualify for the debt? The answer is inflation, right? Economist Larry Summers even had been warning that this could contribute to inflation as well as push existing tuitions to increase, which is what these models show. Why? Because it will free up discretionary income for some people, putting more money into the economy. And what is if inflation is too much money after too few goods? This does not create more goods for us to buy. It only puts more money. And that's problematic because this also leads to inflation. Also, loan forgiveness would, of course, be for federal loans. So these are assets that are on the government's balance sheet that the government will now write off. So who makes up for that shortfall? Taxpayers. And how much will this cost? Well, a lot, actually. Let's go back to this Wharton model estimate that, again, we looked through the different hypotheticals. What we got is income level of 125, max forgiveness of 10K. So I circled that column. If you play out the costs year over year for the next 10 years, this will cost taxpayers $329 billion over the next 10 years. So you could say that those of us who are not benefiting from this are paying for those of us who did, right? And so the Penn-Wharton model draws this conclusion of these things that will or could happen. It says if student loan debt forgiveness is ongoing, students might eventually reorganize their finances towards additional borrowing. So you'll say to yourself, well, 10,000 will be written off, so I'll just take on more, right? That's one thing. Moreover, students might choose to attend qualifying education providers, including students who might otherwise have a harder time with repayment. So it might it encourages more debt because, some of it could just poof away, right? The inclusion of these two effects could, to some extent, make the program a bit more progressive while increasing budgetary costs. A third effect could also emerge. Some of the benefits from debt forgiveness might be captured by colleges themselves in the form of higher prices, both tuition and net. So what this means is that colleges can increase their prices, which they're gonna do.
They're gonna do already anyway.
Because they've had a tuition freeze for the last 2.5 years, and of course inflation hits universities too. It costs them more to hire staff. It costs them more to buy cleaning supplies. It costs them more to keep the lights on, right? And so those prices, the tuition prices that have been frozen for the last 2.5 years, are inevitably going to raise. And so, that will be recovered.
And I think I'm going to argue at an exponential rate, because since the 1980s, they have been on a tear. Prices at universities have been on a skyrocket. Then they're put on this cap during the pandemic. Of course, once that you pull that lever off, boom, it's going back skyrocketing
Right.
again.
Well, take a look at the average tuition for last academic school year. I actually have a graph here from U.S. News and World Reports. So private universities have an average of $38,000. This is single year tuition. As far as I could tell, I looked really hard for this. I think it says the 2021, 2022, even $38,000 for a single year for a private university. I thought sounded low when you think of the Harvards and the Yales of the world, but okay. Public out-of-state universities, $22,000, and public in-state universities, $10,000. So $10,000 of relief will get you a single year, right?
This is highway robbery.
How many? Yes, but how many degrees can you get with 1 year of tuition? Not very many, right? So, okay, but it's nice, right? But again, this is a one-time transaction of debt forgiveness. It's not saying you can now go out and take on more debt, although current students will be eligible. But it's a one-time transfer of wealth, right? For people who arguably don't have a ton of wealth, but it's taking liabilities off of people's balance sheets. But it doesn't fix the problem of for-profit student loans, predatory student loans, which abound. It doesn't fix the fact that the U.S. doesn't have higher education for all at all. And it punishes people who either opted not to go to college because they didn't want to take on this debt. So think about now you're 28, 29, 30 years old, and you're like, oh, well, I didn't go to college because my family couldn't afford it. Maybe we could have had that loan forgiveness. What did I lose in my recent past, right?
Or maybe, hey, I worked my ass off. I saw someone in the chat, Iced Champagne was your screen name in the chat, just said, I worked my ass off to pay off my student loans, and others saying, hey, why?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you cannot file bankruptcy on a student loan. Is that only federal, or can you file it on private, or is it both? Like, do they protect both student loans from bankruptcy?
I don't know about the private, but I don't know why that would be exempt. So you'll recall George W. Bush, during the Bush administration, this was a big thing for him because here was the strategy. Here's the strategy. First of all, Republicans hate lawyers, right? A lot of them. There's always been this clash between lawyers and the Republican Party. And so what do lawyers do? Well, lawyers, when they would go to law school, they would take on enormous law school debt. Then they would get out, and they knew the system, they knew the law, so they would not all of them, but many of them would just file bankruptcy. So they would wipe away their law school debt. This was a strategy, right? And then it would make great money in their law firms, and it didn't matter. Then George W. Bush said, no more of that, and they put the kibosh on bankruptcy for student loan debts. So
yes.
It was largely fueled by the legal lobby. The legal side of things, but I don't know about private versus federal. I know certainly on the federal side it is, but
right. And another thing, I think we've talked about this before, is that universities in the United States have a for-profit system, so they make you repeat core courses that you did in high school because they charge you a lot per unit to do that. Whereas in other systems around the world, you say, I'm going to university to become an accountant, and you take courses to be an accountant. There's no reason to take PE courses if you're going to be an accountant, right? In college, other than to just, well, I guess, keep your body fit. Sure, there's merit in that argument. Go ahead.
When I went to I went to college. I went to Ball State in the early 2000s, and I was a senior when I ended up moving to Portland, getting married, and all that jazz. And so when I went back to school to Portland State, they would take my credits, but I still had to do all of those core classes because I needed to be there at least 2 years to graduate. So there was no way to just go in and be like, I'm almost done and just finish up. They're like, no. So I ended up spending a year taking just a bunch of classes that I absolutely didn't need or want.
That are they're running up your bill, right? So this system will not change with any kind of, this really doesn't do very much at all. Now, Elizabeth Warren, who is a proponent of canceling student loan debt, says, well, a lot of this student debt is for people who didn't even obtain the degree. They went there, they got started, and life happened. They got pregnant, they had to take care of a dad, whatever. And so these are people who we should then just help them. It's a wash, right? You didn't get the degree, you have the debt. Okay. Which again, it's fine for those people, right? But if it's costing taxpayers, then we all have to agree that that is wrong. And let's change the system so that that doesn't happen again, right? This is not that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about this, and I think this is where this is heading, because this debate I see in the chat from people saying, hey, look, I paid off my student loans, and took me years to pay off my student loans to the University of Pittsburgh. And so yesterday, Elizabeth Warren was confronted by a voter. She was giving a speech in Grimes, Iowa. And this person was saying, I understand you're going to, she was just speaking about the student loan forgiveness plan, and she's been a big champion of it. And so she was confronted by a father who's not happy about it. Watch this moment.
I just want to ask one question. My daughter's getting out of school. I've saved all my money. She doesn't have any student loans. Am I going to get my money back? Of course not. So you're going to pay for people who didn't save any money, and those of us that did the right thing get screwed.
No, it's not anybody got screwed. When we
Of
started,
course we did. My buddy had fun, bought a car, went on vacations. I saved my money. He made more than I did. But I worked a double shift, worked extra. My daughter's work sheet is 10. So you're laughing. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. We did the right thing, and we get screwed.
I appreciate
That's
it.
all right.
So I get that that's not relevant, one person's situation to another, but that's very hurtful if you have gone through all the sacrifices because you had no other options, and now all of a sudden you have a few options because it's election time.
Well, I think it's very relevant. I mean, this is he's working a double shift.
Yeah.
His daughter, he works so hard so that his daughter won't be in student loan debt, because this is the contract, this is the garbage we've been sold by our federal government, right?
Yes.
So we can sort of here's what I want to avoid is that I see on Twitter, I see people like going back and forth with each other, right? Like, so you're either in one camp or you're the other, which is, I worked my ass off and I paid off my student loans. Why am I, as a taxpayer, having to foot the bill for this deadbeat over here that can't pay their bill, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one or the other. When the real enemies here is the United States government.
Well,
And-
it's the entire higher educational system, from for-profit universities that make you pay $5,000 a credit to take poetry, right?
Yes, but
when you want to be
fueled-
a doctor.
But fueled by the federal government.
Yes, because they are issuing high interest loans.
So when you go to Europe or other areas, you get free college, and you don't have to repeat any of the garbage classes that you had in high school.
Well, let's not say they're garbage, but
Okay, let me just tell you that I was forced to take history of folk tales just because I had to fulfill certain credit hours. You don't have to do that in Europe or other places because you know what you're going to study. You're going there to study that, and you're not having to fill it with all this extraneous stuff that you have to pay all these additional credit hours for.
Yeah.
So it's all, I think it is in many ways, it is garbage. We see some of these classes that, we highlight them sometimes in the newsletter. Like you can go take I don't know, like ridiculous, like pop culture weird classes that only,
Sure.
by the way, they only pop up in the United States, these classes. You never hear like,
we don't know. We don't have college age kids.
in the University of Liechtenstein, there's a new Harry Styles class on his, like that's the kind of stuff you only hear about at United States colleges, don't you?
Yes, but because it makes the news. Cryptologia in the chat asks a super chat, which is, do you have to apply or will this automatically be wiped out? It should automatically just drop from your balance unless you were in default. Borrowers who are in default now have to use a program called Fresh Start. This doesn't fix the issues with your credit, obviously, but it does. You should be able to apply for at least that $10,000 amount. And then if you're still in default over that, then it at least is reduced by that amount.
So again, we're going back and forth.
I had to take a class.
So go ahead, Philip.
I had to take a class at Portland State. So keep in mind, I was a molecular biology major.
Yeah.
And because I had to do these core curriculum classes to satisfy their requirements, one of the classes I ended up taking was called Cities and the Environment, and it was literally a class about parks in cities. Like they would just look at like how Central Park was designed, and so we had to like write this final paper. And I was at the time I was working full time. I had a wife and kids. Like I was busy. And so I was writing this final paper. I got about 3 paragraphs into it, and I just like completely ran out of energy. Finished the paper by saying, "I just don't have time to finish this," and then sent it to the professor. I literally was just like, "I don't have time for this nonsense," and so that was it. That was like, those classes. There were so many of those classes I had to take that it was just like, why am I here?
Nancy
I'm not
C.
getting anything out of this.
Nancy C. in our chat says, Clayton, you're absolutely right. I had to take 2 meteorology classes in order to complete my psychology degree. No
Okay.
relevance whatsoever. So you needed to study cumulus clouds
Yeah.
to know how to deal with a human brain.
There are people who advocate for charging you less for things that don't go into your core major, or there are also programs out there to, have you do your core, things at a junior college so that you save money, right? But these are not things that students are taught, and we feed college age students this dream of like, you're going to live away, it's going to be so fun, you're going to make your best friends of your life, and you're doing this at a high debt expense.
Right. Or the argument about liberal arts degrees, right? Well, the reason you take these other classes about parks and meteorology and folk tales is because you may not know what you want to do with your life. So spend 2 years at university getting $70,000 in debt to take a folk tales class. By the way, if you don't know what you want to do with your life at 18 years old, don't waste money going to college. Maybe take a year or two, like a gap year. Just stop. Figure out what you want to do, live on when you're
Ham's
young-
beer is really cheap.
What's that?
Ham's beer, the refresher, it's very cheap.
What is
you
that?
can just do beer.
Just have
You can
beer.
just drink a lot of beer and for like a year and then decide what you want to do.
Don't do that.
Because that's what they
You'd
end up doing
definitely be
anyway. It
more
just costs them
well-rounded.
$100,000.
Right. Like I had a roommate, or he was down the hall from me at the University of Pittsburgh. I was in Tower B. If you live in Pittsburgh, you know what that is. And he didn't like ever go to class. I'm like, why are you even here? He's like, I don't know if I want to even be in college. I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm like, so you're literally here wasting your money and your parents' money to figure it out? I got news for you. Don't go to college and waste that kind of money in the United States. And in Europe, again, you kind of pick your directive. Like, I want to be a lawyer. And so then you go to school to be a lawyer.
Yes.
And you're not
for
wasting.
much less, and you don't have an entire
For free,
working
largely.
class of lawyers that have debt. You don't have an entire working class of doctors that have debt. It's not a thing, right? And so it's a one-time thing. It's like you've just sold something, you have this windfall. It's all right for some, and it's okay for now, but it does not it doesn't fix the system. It doesn't even get close to fixing the system.
Ali N in our chat says there's a course called The Study of Tupac Philosophies at the University in California. Yes. Yeah. So
I took a course called PAR course, where you just run around, in the park where you see like things where you pull up or a balance beam. And that was a PE course where we would just run around and like go on the balance beam and do pull-ups. And I still can't do a
Did
pull-up.
you yell parkour every time you jumped on something?
And it's not parkour, it's parkours. And I really thought, I was like, okay, by the end of this, I'm going to be able to do a pull-up. And I cannot. So I
America.
did not get my money's worth for that.
America. So the solution is Biden administration is going to hand you $10,000 in student loan forgiveness one time. No real plan to make free university, free college for kids so that we're not drowning in student loan debt in the United States, unlike any other country in the world, by the way.
There is a lot of ire about this on Twitter right now. People are pretty pissed off about how it will be okay for some and not others. And but again, you have to think about people who are planning to have this debt come back into their life regularly. This several $100s that they haven't had to pay during the pandemic, and now it's about to hit again. And for a lot of people, it won't come back, right? And that will free them up to buy groceries and to buy gas. And so for those people, at least we can sort of be happy for those people, while at the same time realizing, though, this is going to cost taxpayers.
Yeah. Also, I'm just curious because Nancy Pelosi told us a few months ago that President Biden can't do this. Like the president of the United States doesn't have the authority and the power to do this. So I'm not sure if he's talked with Nancy or not, but she said this. Take a listen.
People think that the president of the United States, is this more on the subject than you ever want to know? Well, you'll let me know. People think that the president of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Guess that changed. I don't know. I guess that changed.
Well, I don't know. You could take him to court for that if you'd like to see, sort
I
of
wonder if
pandemic related.
I mean, if they're really upset about it, if Nancy's really upset about it, I wonder if they'll sue him over this.
She's
She just
not.
doesn't seem to care anymore. She's got bedhead.
But I just want to frame this a second. She's thrown in the towel. She's like, all those late night trips
I don't care
to
anymore. She's got a Kleenex bedhead. She's
all
like,
those late night trips to
my husband's
Taiwan.
in jail.
Yeah, like, I'm sleeping on a plane to Taiwan. I got to check on my semiconductors. Today we're complaining about $10,000 in student loan forgiveness. So I did look this up. I did the math on this. That to have free college for Americans would cost $58 billion. Okay, this is first dollar college. So the $58 billion would be the cost. Now, over about 11 years or so, it would cost about $800 billion to give free university to Americans. Now, just think about what that would do to the American economy to not have an entire generation saddled with massive amounts of debt, which means they can't go and buy things. Okay, that's one piece of this. The other piece of this is imagine what this would do if we just repositioned the $800 billion a year that we're spending on war. That's our military defense budget, $879 billion a year. In 1 year, that's what we spend on defense. In 1 year, $58 billion is what it would cost for free college for kids in America.
And look what we've sent to Ukraine already.
Yes.
Yeah, we've sent over 60 billion in the past few months to Ukraine.
But again, those student loans are assets on the United States balance sheet, right? And so if I've given you a 12% loan because your parents make around $200,000 a year, so you can't get a favorable loan to go to university, I'm going to charge you 12%. That's on my balance sheet as the government, right? They make money for that. So why would they do that?
Well, all of the benefits that I just talked about. I mean, think about how
That's a benefit for you, not for me, the government, that we've just, as we play this out.
So even federal loans, the federal loans that kids take out for college are not interest free?
No.
They are.
No, that's ridiculous.
No.
Yeah,
They're based on, and in
is it
fact,
based on credit?
And in fact, as you enter the workforce, then those loans adjust every year based on your income. So if you get a nice little raise at work, then your loan payment will go up, and they know it. It's really predatory in how people live like this. You can refinance that debt, but they come back around every year. They look at your tax return and say, did pretty all right last year. Okay, you're going to owe us a little more now.
And if you have trouble paying those bills, by the way, which many Americans do and can't afford to pay back, they can't pay rent, they can't afford groceries. 20 million Americans right now are behind on their energy bills. I saw that statistic this afternoon. So don't worry, though. The 87,000 new IRS agents they just hired who will be armed, they will be ready to come after you to collect on that student loan
And the
debt.
Department of Education also
I
have
forgot
them
about those guys
armed.
that they have armed and dangerous as well.
Well, during the
They
pandemic,
come at you both ways.
during the pandemic, there were federal orders that utility companies could not turn off electricity if people were in arrears. Will that continue to happen? Who knows?
Yeah.
Winter is coming.
Well, we've got more news to get to here on the show. We are going to talk about these COVID lies exposed as it relates to mask mandates and a whole bunch of other bits of... one of my favorite words is mendacity. And I think that sums up the COVID pandemic from our federal government and media figures, especially CNN.
I can think of another word.
Mendacity. Wasn't mendacity the word that was in the movie Cat in a Hot Tin Roof? Like it was all through that movie. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the chat if that's the case. Anyway,
Lose me on that one.
Oh, such a great movie with Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, I know it, but I don't remember
Such
that.
a great movie. But we're going to get to that in a second. But my fellow Americans, if you have an IRA, you have a 401k or a savings account, things are scary out there right now. Again, 20 million Americans behind on their energy bills right now. The government printing $30 trillion. Inflation, the highest we've seen since 1982. Peter Schiff just said that we're already heading for one of the worst recessions we've seen in modern times. And so very, very troubling. It's only a matter of time before the US dollar starts crashing down. So this house of cards is about to happen. It's going to collapse. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. I want you to talk to our friends at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver, actual physical assets, my friends. actual physical assets. Again, I'm watching a show right now on Netflix. It's called The Pirates of Arak Island in Alaska, where they buried 150 jugs filled with gold coins. It's worth like $300 million. So the whole show is about them trying to find these coins, just like Oak Island, you know? Anyway, fascinating. So real tangible gold, real tangible assets. They're not making any more of this stuff, right? And so if you go to redactedlikesgold.com, they're going to give you $10,000 in free silver when you open a qualifying account. So just go to redactedlikesgold.com, give them your information. They'll send you a gold report. They're going to send you a gold kit. And it'll walk you through what to expect, you know, where you store the gold coins, put them in your own safe, or you can have them held at offsite at a separate safe storage location, which a lot of investors do. Anyway, check them out. Go to redactedlikesgold.com, get $10,000 in free silver when you open up a qualifying account. So we are nearing 1 million subscribers here on the show. I know it's an arbitrary number, but I really appreciate it, and it feels good. You know, hey.
Yeah.
Feels good.
You got to have a goal in life.
I do. And so that's a goal. We also have 3,000 likes right now, but we have 8,000 or 9,000 people watching. Can you smash that like button? It'd be so kind if you would do that. Or Rumble it as well if you're watching us on Rumble or Twitch or other places. Please do that. All right. Well, for 2 years, if you turned on CNN, God help you if you did, you might have seen constant interviews with the likes of, I don't know, name them, right? Like Dr. Fauci was constantly on CNN.
Sure.
Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
Yes.
Who Joe Rogan raked over the coals for the lies that CNN was telling.
He launched a separate podcast just to break down the weekly news about coronavirus.
Dr. Leana Wen. You might have seen her all over CNN, Dr. Leana Wen. All of them pushed draconian positions on COVID, particularly masks. Masks and mask mandates, especially on children. Well, not surprisingly, they've pretty much all changed their tune in some way. But the latest to change her tune and do a 180-degree turn is CNN medical analyst Dr. Leana Wen. Was one of the strongest continual advocates for masks and masks in schools. And, by the way, universal masking. She just tweeted this article that she's written on why she's flipped. She says, many on Twitter have asked, how did I go from being extremely cautious with COVID precautions for nearly 2 years to now resuming pre-pandemic activities, including not masking my young kids at school? And then she explains in a Washington Post piece, which we will go through in a minute. But first, I want to provide some context here, because CNN gave her a massive platform to spread garbage, quite honestly, misinformation and stuff that we patently knew was false. In fact, she went so far as to say the cloth masks weren't good enough for kids. That was one of her big things. Don't use those cloth masks. They need the really industrial strength masks. So if you've got like a 4-year-old who's at school and who can barely breathe in class, you got to put that like Darth Vader mask on them, make it even worse for them. She said if they're unvaccinated, they need to get weekly tests. There was a whole host of things she said. I want to kind of go through some of the flashbacks. Here's one of them. Take a first look.
Wolf, this is now one of the most dangerous times in the pandemic when it comes to children, because we have the more contagious Delta variant, we have surges, and we have so many adults letting down their guard, not wearing masks, not getting vaccinated. That's contributing to this really dangerous environment for children. That said, we do know what it takes to get our children back in school safely. We also know that it requires layers. And so when we remove a layer, for example, we remove the layer of distancing because we can't get kids back in school in person full time if we still keep 6 feet distancing. But if we remove that layer, then indoor masking becomes even more important. Universal masking, as Andy mentioned, type of mask also matters. Ideally, KN95 or N95 if the child is able to tolerate that. If not, at least a 3-ply surgical mask. Cloth masks are not enough. Improved ventilation, vaccination for the teachers and staff and parents, and very importantly, testing as well. We should at least be having weekly testing for all the unvaccinated children and staff. Putting all that together is how we can get kids back in school.
So someone in the chat say, yeah, there's a lot of people changing their tune because they must know some sort of big hearings are going to be coming, some sort of Nuremberg 2 style hearings.
I too saw that comment from Sydney Pureblood, and I appreciated it.
But I think it's, you know.
Did you read
Go ahead.
the thing that I sent you where YouTube even removed their mass misinformation policy?
Yeah. Yeah. So now what YouTube is saying, hey, you know, we're going to pull back on, we're getting rid of that. So now there's no restriction on that anymore. So, okay, there you go. Everyone's doing it, right? It's the cool thing to do, apparently. You know, what's amazing, though, CNN even promoted her book that she wrote about this. Like they were, you know, every time they had her on there, they were promoting her book about COVID and COVID restrictions and lifestyle and all of these things that we needed to be aware of. She then took it even further by pushing for universally, all the time, and vaccine passports. Watch.
Right, I think it depends on the circumstance. So if you're going to the grocery store and the grocery store doesn't have the capacity to enforce some kind of proof of vaccination, then they have to say that indoor masking needs to apply because we don't know who's vaccinated and who's not. The same thing for schools. Schools, you can't expect the teacher in every school to be asking, well, you're not wearing a mask, so are you vaccinated or not? And so if that's the case, everybody should be wearing masks. But I could imagine there are already concert venues or workplaces that are saying, if you are not vaccinated, you can't come, or you have to get a negative test. And that's what's needed in order to really incentivize vaccines at this point.
We just saw them.
Okay.
Can you imagine living in her house?
That didn't make any sense because if you are vaccinated, I couldn't follow that. Like we all need masks.
No, you don't need to follow. Just shut up and fall in line like a sheep.
Okay.
You don't need to ask questions. When people of authority are on CNN telling you how to live your life, you don't ask questions. Okay?
It feels so weird to watch these pieces now that are like time capsules. Right?
It is. It really is.
We're like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
right,
and
okay.
you know, and sadly, so many people followed it, and so many people fell in line with it, or they had no choice, or they moved as a result of it. Or they didn't want to lose their jobs, so they said, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this to my body. Then I guess you'll fire me, like the U.S. military had to do, of course. And so many jobs, so many businesses had to do this, right? Now the lawsuits are starting to pile up. So if you think that was bad, so she was also pushing for workplace shaming of other people. This is what I loved. She was pushing for, hey, you know, we really got to call out these punks who are not getting vaccinated. Make sure we really kind of shame them publicly at the workplace. Watch.
We get this under control, and which way we go depends on what we do now when it comes to vaccination, to overcoming disinformation. And what we really need to do at this point is to make vaccination the easy choice. It needs to be hard for people to remain unvaccinated. Right now, it's kind of the opposite. It's fine. I mean, it's easy if you're unvaccinated. You can do everything you want to do anyway. But at some point, these mandates by workplaces, by schools, I think it will be important to say, hey, you can opt out, but if you want to opt out, you have to sign these forms. You have to get twice weekly testing. Basically, we need to make getting vaccinated the easy choice. That is what it's going to take for us to actually end the pandemic.
So you need to sign forms. We need to publicly shame you. Oh, you're one of those people? Come to my office. We're going to track you. We need to make it the opposite. You're living your life. We need to make it shameful that you're living your life. This is even Democracy Now! You know, they fell in line pretty much with CNN on this. Even Democracy Now!, the station, they had her on. And this is probably my favorite clip of all of them. Watch this.
That when vaccinated and unvaccinated people are mixing, unless there is proof of vaccination, everybody should still be wearing masks. And so I actually support what the CDC is now doing, which is going back to this indoor mask requirement, because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated, that they have been walking around without masks. And in fact, that's what led to the surge that we're seeing.
Oh,
can't trust them.
Can't trust these people. You just can't trust someone who... Yeah, we can't trust them. If you don't have a vaccine, we just cannot trust you. And these people were just walking around. Like these unvaccinated people just were out there. They literally were just walking around. The nerve of these people. So let's go through her article now, because now she's had quite a revelation. She's flipped 180 degrees on the masking piece specifically. And she came out and basically admits now in this Washington Post piece that her child developmentally has been suffering and hurt as a result of these draconian mask policies. So let's kind of go through this on her Washington Post piece a little bit.
Well, she talks about how she had a 2-year-old when the pandemic started, and she gave birth in April, shortly after the pandemic hit. And so she, pulled her son out of preschool because she didn't want to expose the baby. And this was at the time sort of something that, we didn't know enough, that most of us might have agreed that was a reasonable choice, right? But then she talks about how the Omicron variant changed everything because it's no longer possible to prevent yourself from getting COVID. And she talks about how she got her children vaccinated. But she also says, the risks of them becoming sick from COVID are lower, and the odds of developing long COVID are lower with the Omicron variant, which is not a narrative that the mainstream media has been pushing. They still very much want us to be afraid of long COVID. We regularly get fear-invoking headlines like long COVID, even from Omicron, will, make you impotent or whatever, give you...
well, and like that news story where the kids are going to make kids that are, kindergarten or whatever, they have to wear the mask like the first 10 days or something, but the little kids have to wear them the whole school year.
Yes.
Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says, I was willing to limit my children's activities for a year or two, but not for their entire childhood. So
look, we felt like that too. Like, oh, okay, this, we had she was 3 when the pandemic hit, and we thought, well, this isn't so bad, because also she had a brother and a sister, so she wasn't alone. She didn't have anybody who she was not going to socialize with, but we absolutely could not keep up with virtual preschool because it meant that I was making butterflies out of egg cratons all day, which I did for, some amount of time, but I just couldn't keep up. While also having a full-time job. So this, I understand it like for a little bit, but then you have to also realize that these are their most formative years. So the older children could do okay with a laptop, right? The babies could not. So this is a severe calculation. It's not just like, oh, it's all right, they get no preschool. We know that preschool is formative time and crucial to academic success. So these are big calculations, not just like, it's all right for a little bit.
she says, as most Americans, COVID in our family will almost certainly be mild. And like most Americans, we made the decision that following precautions strict enough to prevent the highly contagious BA.5 will be very challenging. So she says, my kids are going to get COVID this year, probably in school, just like they would contract the flu or any other respiratory virus. She says, here's the nugget, though, that I want to call out. Masking has harmed our son's language development, and limiting both the kids' extracurriculars and social interactions would negatively affect their childhood and hinder my and my husband's ability to work. So it has harmed language development.
That's very relatable of you to say now.
Now, right? So we knew, and by the way, we were hearing, even at the time, so a lot of those clips I showed you were very recent. Like, these are not like years ago clips. These are recent, where we already had the data. We already had data from speech pathologists and speech therapists seeing tremendous surge in developmental problems from speech from children. So yes, it has harmed children tremendously, and it set them back for social interaction and extracurriculars, and where kids feel like it's their fault somehow, that if they have this virus, that it's their fault.
Yeah.
That these other kids had to go home from school, even though they don't have the virus, they have to go home from school now because they've got the scarlet letter, and so they're sent home, and everyone's sent home.
Or as Miles, our son, called it, because when we got COVID for the first time, the rules were still that if someone in the classroom got it, the whole bubble was sent home, and so for 2 weeks, so he was the reason that his whole 6th grade had to go home and go virtual for 2 weeks. And he felt awful. And he said, I feel like I have the cheese touch, which is from Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Oh, yeah.
Where, and he's like, oh, it was me. He felt terrible. And it was so sad.
We never did that with chicken pox. We never did that with the flu. We haven't done that with colds. We haven't done that with anything else. And by the way, and the thing that pisses me off more than anything else is that we knew this. We knew it, and they were hiding it from us. That's the troubling thing. And these doctors who got these massive platforms on CNN to spin this shit on a constant basis, to sell books on the backs of it. I mean, look at Andrew Cuomo, for crying out loud, in New York, writing a book on leadership during COVID and during when people, literally, he's lying about data and numbers and people dying in nursing homes. Just the mendacity of all of this just really, really bothers me. And she says, look, some people are going to still protect and, take their families and do all of this. And that's fine. There's no one size fits all answer. So again, I don't want to stigmatize other parents and caregivers for the difficult choices they must make. Oh, you don't? You don't now want to stigmatize
But shouldn't
people.
she be comfortable saying it's okay to take it off when she was so comfortable telling us we absolutely had to wear it, right?
Right, but she was telling us, she was trying to shame people. These people that are walking around unvaccinated. These
But she won't
people.
shame people who will wear the mask, right?
Right. I don't want to stigmatize you. I don't want to. Now I don't want to stigmatize you. Now that we know these, now that the other shoe is
Now
about
that
to
I'm
drop.
just one of those people walking around.
Right.
Yeah.
And I see still
I wonder if she
people
trusts herself now.
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Let us know what you think about this. I find it so disturbing. But we're going to see more of these people, dropping. And again, I think it comes back to as poignantly as someone just said in the chat room about this idea of a Nuremberg 2 style trial, like starting to really look more closely at what's going on with these, with COVID.
Hey, look who came to talk. Hi, buddy. Sorry.
Hi, buddy.
Grover.
Grover just showed up.
You miss me?
I got him.
Come on, let me hold him.
He came to me.
All right. You stepped in at the end of the. Yeah, I know. You want to come. You want to come to Daddy. Okay.
All right, we had a couple people in the chat saying, "Where's Grover?" And he just popped up. You summoned him.
Hi, buddy. All right, we have some super chats we want to get to.
We do. Jay Thomas. Well, thank God, Natalie. We have been trying to enlighten you on the climax hoax. Sequestering carbon means everything on Earth dies, including us.
Yes. And those comments did make a difference in the type of research that I sought out. So thank you.
Yeah, I always say be very leery of people who are inflexible. If you know people that literally won't change their position when presented with facts, run away from those people, and also be very, very careful of people who just operate on blind faith, right? And don't actually pay attention to data and science and the numbers. Like if those people are like, well, I just feel it. I just know that this is the way. Run away from those people too. That's my
and seeking truth is a path, because in that path you're going to get some of it's going to be wrong. You're going to go over here a little bit because that's where information leads you, and then you go in that side deep, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, there's more information over here, and then you kind of go, and then it just starts to form itself. But there's a lot of times where you're a little bit on the wrong side, you're a little bit on the right side, and you have to be willing to go both ways in order to get to the ultimate truth.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you for that comment.
Boru, you guys are refreshingly authentic. Haven't watched Fox or TV since Clayton left. Totally serendipity, although not intentional. God bless.
Oh, thank you.
Jamelia Asfu, Scott, you are my hero, and we love you. God bless you and your family. David Malton, they are saying they want good equipment over there before Britain and USA send our troops in. Pay for our war first.
Yeah, I mean, the real story is that we're already there, and a lot of these HIMARS vehicles that are being operated are absolutely already being, are already being led by the United States. They're already being run by the. Sorry, you can take the other camera because I'm not going to be able to lean up to that. It looks like crap. I mean the two shot. Sorry, sorry. There we go. That one. Yeah. Yeah, so of course, they're not Ukrainians running these things and using these HIMARS. So who is? Anyway.
Maker's Mushrooms, I only owe $3,500 on my loans. This is not fair for the American people that do not apply. I would rather pay off my loan than inflated taxes.
Yeah, I get that.
Jesse Castaneos, USA took 55% of Mexican territory. USA left the Taliban in power. Putin wants oil pipes and trains untaxed to Europe through Crimea. Ukraine negotiate.
Yes. In fact, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has been accusing the West of keeping Ukraine from even coming to the peace table. So, yes, peace talks now.
Events, I fully understand that both parties are corrupted. However, the cancer of tyranny originally stems from the Democrats spreading into the Republicans, creating enough rhinos to cooperate with the shenanigans. I mean, that Peter Ked with a super sticker, thank you. And then Brizzy864. So the First Lady has Rona again. Happy Kobe Day.
Does she have a repeat case?
My God.
Oh,
They've had it like 30 times now. Like, how many times in a week can you get, can you get COVID? That's my question.
And Yvette sent another one, says, Clayton, US $20. Clayton, take Natalie out for a nice dinner. She's leaning away from the left. She deserves it.
Yes, I am, because her birthday is this weekend, so I'm taking her out. Although your mom wants to pay for the dinner.
Oh,
so
okay.
But I'm going to pay for everything else. But
That's nice.
Thank you to your mom for paying for dinner. But I'm going to take you. Oh, actually, I'm taking you out the next day for the big meal with the whole family. I'm taking everyone
there goes
out.
the surprise.
Well, she already knows that.
You know what I
She was the
asked
one that
for
shot.
my birthday too is I want one of those reading lamps that like hooks onto a book, like one of those clip lamps where the lamp comes over into the book. I've been asking for that for like Christmas and Mother's Day, and I still didn't get it. So
I have never heard you ask for this.
yes, I've asked for it twice because the kids all have one and I steal it.
Okay.
And I was like, I want
Well,
one
now
of those.
everybody's going to make sure that she got it this time, because
Yeah,
now
I'll
the
let
world
you know,
knows.
and I'll
Yes,
show it off.
I'm fully aware of the reading light. I've
silly little
heard about
thing.
this. I've heard about this. My little girl said that.
You'll never hear the end of it till you get it now.
I know.
Oh, Art says
you're
he
going to
got
be
one
you're
of
going to be
those
a,
yard sale.
you'll be flooded with the little lights. You'll just everybody's going to start getting for you.
Yeah.
I had a friend that I went to visit her house. Her and her husband were like friends of mine. And so I went over, and she had just like all these curios full of salt and pepper shakers, like from all over the world and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, you collect salt and pepper shakers? And I was like, kind of asking her about it. Turns out she doesn't like them. But because somebody had got her some like a couple times, then people would be over and they'd see these fancy salt and pepper shakers. So whenever they thought of getting her a gift, that's what they got her. So she ended up like with this curse of every time somebody gave her a gift, they gave her another salt and pepper shaker. So she just had like, so maybe she's like, I don't care about them. She's like, I just have them.
Funny. That's really funny. I don't like
funny.
those either. They get kind of grimy and they don't even hold the good kind of salt. And it's not even the pepper you can grind. I really am against salt and pepper shakers as well. So don't give me those.
No. Yeah.
I'm against
I was
that.
gonna
That's
say
all the
something
super
about-
chats.
Okay. Oh, Event
we
Simonis
just had
just
another
sent.
one.
Thank you, Event. Man, cranking them out. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I didn't read it though. It was.
I think there was a question about monkeypox.
Does Portugal have a Fleming steakhouse? No, I don't
No.
think so, but I'm not quite sure. I don't think so. No, they've got separate. They've got really good separate kind of like steak on a stone place. It's really good.
That's
But the
nice.
seafood in Portugal, you can't like nothing compares to the delicious fish and sardines and everything else you can get in Portugal for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you here tomorrow. Thank you so much for your patronage today. And we'll have more for you tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. It's redacted.inc. That will be waiting for you in the morning. We'll be waiting for you in the afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.